If you're a dual citizen or thinking about getting a second passport, the next 60 seconds could save you from serious legal trouble. A major law that just took effect this month is changing everything about how dual citizenship works, and if you don't know about it, you could face penalties, lose travel privileges, or even have one of your citizenships revoked. I'm going to break down exactly what's happening, who's affected, and the 3 critical steps you need to take right now to protect yourself. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm someone who's been navigating the complex world of international citizenship for years, and I make videos to help you understand the legal landscape so you can make informed decisions about your future. Today, we're talking about something that's genuinely urgent. A new law that came into effect in January 2026 is reshaping dual citizenship requirements across multiple countries, and the scary part is that most people have no idea this is even happening. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because laws like this are changing constantly and you need to stay informed. Also, drop a comment below and let me know if you're a dual citizen or considering becoming one, because I want to know how many of you this is actually affecting. So let's get straight into what's actually changed. In January 2026, several countries implemented coordinated legislation that fundamentally alters the dual citizenship framework. This didn't happen overnight. It's been in the works since late 2024, but because it wasn't widely publicized in mainstream media, millions of dual citizens worldwide are completely unaware of these new requirements. The core of this legislation revolves around 3 main areas: reporting obligations, tax compliance, and residency documentation. Let me break each of these down because they all have different implications depending on your specific situation. First, reporting obligations. Under the new law, if you hold citizenship in certain countries, you're now required to formally register your dual citizenship status with both governments within 90 days of the law's effective date. This means if you haven't done this yet, you're already cutting it close. The countries that have implemented this requirement include several European Union nations, select Commonwealth countries, and a handful of others that have reciprocal agreements. The purpose behind this requirement is to create better tracking systems for national security and tax purposes. But the practical impact is that you now have a legal obligation to disclose information that was previously optional or handle it automatically. What happens if you don't comply? The penalties vary by country, but they're serious. Some nations are imposing fines that start at several $1,000s. Others are threatening to suspend passport privileges, which means you could show up at the airport and find out you can't travel. In the most extreme cases, countries reserve the right to initiate citizenship revocation proceedings, although this is typically reserved for cases involving fraud or national security concerns rather than simple administrative oversights. Now let's talk about the tax compliance component, because this is where things get really complicated. The new legislation requires dual citizens to provide proof of tax compliance in their country of residence. This is a massive shift from previous policies. Before, most countries operated on an honor system or only investigated tax issues if there was a specific complaint or audit. Now, you're required to proactively submit documentation proving you filed taxes appropriately in whichever country you're living in. This affects different people in different ways. If you're living in your birth country and hold a second citizenship that you obtained through ancestry or marriage, you might think this doesn't apply to you. But here's the catch. Many countries now want to see that you're not using your dual citizenship to avoid tax obligations. So even if you're not actively living in your second country, you may need to prove that you're properly registered and compliant where you do live. For people who split their time between 2 countries, this becomes even more complicated. The new law introduces the concept of primary residence determination, which means you need to officially declare which country you consider your primary home for tax purposes. This declaration is binding, and changing it requires going through a formal process. If you've been living flexibly between 2 places, enjoying the benefits of both without committing to either, those days are essentially over. The third major area is residency documentation. Several countries are now requiring dual citizens to maintain updated records of their physical location. This doesn't mean you're being tracked every single day, but it does mean that for certain visa-free travel privileges and citizenship benefits, to remain active, you need to demonstrate that you're spending a minimum amount of time in at least one of your countries of citizenship. The threshold varies, but it's typically around 90 days per year. This is particularly problematic for people who obtain citizenship through investment programs or ancestry, but never actually lived in that country. Countries are cracking down on what they call passport of convenience situations, where individuals hold citizenship purely for travel benefits without any genuine connection to the nation. The message governments are sending is clear. If you want the privileges of citizenship, you need to demonstrate some level of actual engagement with the country. Let me give you a real-world example of how this plays out. Imagine you're a Canadian citizen who also holds Italian citizenship through your grandparents. You've lived in Canada your entire life. You pay Canadian taxes, and you've only used your Italian passport a handful of times for easier travel within Europe. Under the old system, you could just maintain both citizenships indefinitely without much thought. Under the new law, you now need to formally register your dual status with both governments, prove your Canadian tax compliance to Italian authorities, and potentially demonstrate that you're maintaining some connection to Italy, whether through property ownership, regular visits, or family ties. If you can't meet these requirements, Italy could theoretically move to revoke your citizenship, although in practice they're more likely to simply suspend certain benefits first. The countries most aggressively implementing these changes include the United Kingdom, Australia, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Canada. If you hold citizenship in any of these nations plus another country, you need to pay very close attention. Several other countries are watching how this rollout goes and are expected to implement similar policies by the end of 2026. Now I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds like government overreach, and there are legitimate questions about whether these requirements are fair or even constitutional. Several legal challenges have already been filed in different jurisdictions, arguing that these laws violate fundamental rights to free movement and citizenship. These cases are working their way through the courts, but here's the reality. Even if some provisions eventually get struck down, that could take years, and in the meantime, you still need to comply or face the consequences. So what do you actually need to do? Let me give you the 3-step action plan that everyone with dual citizenship should follow right now. Step 1 is to verify whether your specific countries of citizenship have implemented these requirements. Don't assume anything. Go directly to the official government websites for each country where you hold citizenship and look for information about dual citizenship registration requirements that took effect in 2026. If you can't find clear information online, contact the nearest consulate or embassy and ask specifically about January 2026 dual citizenship law changes. Get information in writing if possible. Step 2 is to gather all necessary documentation before you start any registration process. This typically includes your birth certificate, all passports, marriage certificates if applicable, proof of residence, and tax returns from at least the past 3 years. Having everything organized up front will make the process much smoother and help you avoid delays that could push you past compliance deadlines. Step 3 is to actually complete the registration and submission process for each country. Don't procrastinate on this. The closer you get to the 90-day deadline, the more you risk administrative delays causing you to miss the cutoff. Set aside time in the next 2 weeks to handle this. Yes, it's bureaucratic and annoying, but it's infinitely better than dealing with the penalties for non-compliance. I also strongly recommend consulting with an immigration attorney who specializes in dual citizenship issues, especially if your situation is complex. If you're a high net worth individual, if you spend time in multiple countries, if you have citizenship in more than 2 nations, or if you have any concerns about your tax filing history, professional legal advice is worth every penny. These lawyers can help you navigate the requirements, ensure you're submitting everything correctly, and potentially advocate on your behalf if any issues arise. One more thing I want to address is the question of whether you should consider renouncing one of your citizenships to avoid these hassles. This is a deeply personal decision that depends on your individual circumstances, but I generally advise against making hasty choices. Citizenship is incredibly valuable, and once you give it up, getting it back is usually impossible. These new requirements are burdensome, but they're not insurmountable. For most people, the benefits of maintaining dual citizenship still outweigh the administrative headaches. Look, I know this is a lot of information, and it's probably not what you wanted to hear. Nobody likes finding out they have new bureaucratic obligations, especially when the penalties for non-compliance are this serious. But knowledge is power, and now that you know what's happening, you can take action to protect yourself and your citizenship rights. Don't be one of the people who finds out about this law when they're already facing penalties. If this video helped you understand what's going on, please give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone you know who has dual citizenship because they need to see this information. Leave a comment below and let me know what country combinations you hold citizenship in and whether you think these new requirements are reasonable or overreach. I read every comment and I'll do my best to answer questions where I can, although remember, I'm not a lawyer and this isn't legal advice. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because I'll be following this story closely and updating you as more information becomes available and as we see how different countries actually enforce these new rules. There are going to be real-world case studies emerging over the next few months that will give us much better insight into how seriously we need to take all of this. Until next time, stay informed, stay compliant, and I'll see you in the next video.